Welcome to a special event on the British election. We have a hung parliament. Britain finished up, the Conservatives finished up with 306 seats, Labor 258, the Democrats 57, and then a whole lot of minor parties. That looks a bit of a mess, Tom.
Yes, it does. It's no surprise that it was a hung parliament. Of course, many people were predicting this, and in fact, the share of vote is in line with opinion polls. What was interesting was that the Lib Dems, despite having appeared to have won the television debates, didn't really get much of an improvement in their vote. Their vote was only up 1%. They actually lost 5 seats compared to the last election. Yeah. So Nick Clegg, who runs the Lib Dems, has a chance to be he will be the power broker. But I think his authority with the electorate is perhaps not what he thought it would be. I think they'll be able to negotiate some compromises with either the Conservatives or Labor, but it's not going to be a Lib Dem-led government, as some people suspected.
Well, there are really only 3 options. Either the Lib Dems go with the Conservatives, and they said they'd go with the party that got the most votes, and that's
although,
the
of course,
Conservatives.
That's what was supposed to happen in Tasmania, and that didn't happen.
Either that or they go with the Labor Party, or the third option is to allow the Conservatives to run the government as a minority government.
Yeah, and the history of minority governments, both in the UK and here, in fact, in any of the Westminster systems, is not good. I think a Conservative Lib Dem, calling it a coalition would not be the right term. It's just an agreement to cooperate on certain issues, budgetary matters, votes of confidence, that sort of thing. I think that's the most likely outcome. There's sort of universal loathing for Gordon Brown within the Dems, in fact within the Labor Party. So I
think the Labor Party is saying if they want to get a deal done with the Lib Dems, they might drop Brown.
Well, they might have to, absolutely.
The biggest sticking point, it seems to me, though, is that the Lib Dems want to have proportional representation, which is a bit like our Hare-Clark system and in Tassie, our Senate system. Now, that is not going to be a good outcome. That means no party will ever get a majority.
No, well, of course, proportional representation, countries that don't have it think it's the answer to all their political problems. In fact, the New Zealanders introduced it a decade ago. It's been an unmitigated disaster there. It works after a fashion in Europe, but I mean, it's not like European democracy is any great example of long, stable governments. You know, look at Italy or France at certain times, Germany. And there is no way the Tory hierarchy will agree to PR, proportional representation.
The other problem is that if you go to preferential voting, which works well in Australia, the Lib Dems would always give their preferences to Labor, and Labor would give theirs to the Lib Dems ahead of the Conservatives, and Conservatives would never get into power.
No, in fact, it's an interesting historical aside. 100 years ago, when the old Liberal Party was one of the 2 dominant parties, it started losing because the new Labor Party, before and especially after World War I, started becoming popular. And the Liberal and Labor vote split the anti-Tory vote. As a result, the Tories kept winning Parliament, winning power throughout the 20s and so forth because of these 2 parties.
That's why Churchill changed sides.
Absolutely it is. In the late 20s, well, he changed sides a couple of times actually. Yeah. But so the Tories want to keep the first past the post system. I think even if they form a governing coalition with the Lib Dems, it's not going to be the most stable of governments.
Which means it's unlikely that the thing will run for 5 years.
No, it almost certainly won't. In fact, I reckon irrespective of what happens after this election, whatever coalition is agreed upon, there will be another British election inside 18 months, almost certain, because you need to have one of the 2 major parties with a clear majority able to govern.
And I think if you had another election, that the Conservatives would win.
I think they would, because I think the public doesn't want Gordon Brown in. It's flirted with the Lib Dems, but it knows that they're not, a governing party. They didn't get enough of the vote, and I reckon in all these marginals where the Conservatives just lost out, David Cameron would get up.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, the other major issue is whoever becomes the government over there, they've got to cut the tripe out of their costs.
Well, one of the curious things is the Lib Dems, curiously for a left-wing party, actually agrees that government expenditure has to be cut back. So there's
not as aggressive as the Conservatives.
Well, but reasonably aggressively. And that's some common ground that them and the Conservatives had, this idea that Labor has mucked up the economy, which it has, and that they together could possibly work, or they would agree to work, to reduce government spending and cut the deficit. Now, overnight's been very interesting news that the European Commission, which is sort of like the European government, has organised a massive bailout for Greece and the other troubled countries. Now, Britain, not being part of the euro, possibly can't access that, but Britain is, economically has got similar problems to Greece. Not quite as bad, but still bad enough. And whoever is governing the country needs to do something about it.
I agree. And there was the other interesting thing in that bailout is that Germans had regional elections over the weekend, and the Conservative government, the federal government, lost a lot of seats in the regional elections because the Germans can't stand the thought of Germany providing most of the funds to Greece.
Well, look, I mean, a Greek public sector worker retires aged 53. It's astonishing in the modern world. The Germans work right up to their late 60s. So they say, well, we're the frugal ones. We save our money. We work much longer lives. And yet we're now being forced to give all of our money, or a lot of our money, to you, the lazy Greeks. Politically a very difficult sell in conservative Germany. And again, this is a problem with bailing governments out. If the people disagree, you've got riots in Athens, you've got Germans saying we don't like Angela Merkel, it's very, very hard to forge a workable bailout and compromise if the people simply say we don't want this.
So what's happened on markets today?
Well, the stock market's actually up very strongly this morning. It's up about 1.8%. It hasn't erased the losses of last week. The market fell almost 7%. The news of the Greek bailout, which occurred after Wall Street closed on Friday, in fact just on last night, has been appreciated as being very good news. Obviously they'll want to know that that's locked down, but Greece has been the major concern. If that's dealt with for the time being, then the markets hopefully will continue to rise and claw back some of the recent losses.
I saw the other thing is too that one thing in favour of Britain cutting costs is they own over 80% of the Royal Bank of Scotland, and they've got about a majority of Lloyds Bank.
Yes.
Now, they could double in value in the next couple of years, which could give them, it's said in the Australian here this morning, about 60 billion of profit.
Yes. Well, in fact, curiously, some of that could come from National Australia Bank, because National Australia Bank wants to buy up to 300 branches over in the UK and just into business. If the NAB's bid for AXA has been scuttled, which looks to be the case by the ACCC, they may look to buy some of these nationalised British banking assets from the UK government. So yes, the British government, for a change, actually has something to sell, and its investment in British banks at the height of the financial crisis, that is when it bailed them out, could prove to be financially quite a good move.
Well, let's hope the Conservatives can cobble together a government, because I think they're the people that ought to be running the country. But watch this space. As things evolve, we'll have another discussion on it.
And who knows, it might be a good example for Australia's Conservatives, who could be looking to cobble together a government sometime pretty soon.
Thank you all for watching.